I'm curious, why education?
I'm a teacher at heart. I've taught in my younger years. I used to lecture even at university in accounting, tax, and auditing. So it was really natural for me that when I retired from corporate life, I was going to be in education because I know what education can do. And as a country, we can't be left behind. And we've got to solve some of the problems that we have. I spoke about the problem of language as an example. I don't think anyone is going to solve the issue of language and how we create terminology or lexicology around African languages to make sure that our children can learn for meaning. I don't think, we can stand on the side, especially around the issue of production of content, of books, or using technology as an example. We have to get involved ourselves and show what decolonization looks like.
What is the future of education in Africa?
Education in the continent, it really has to address some of the fundamental issues of how we teach and how we improving access, because obviously South Africa is way ahead of a lot of countries in the continent in terms of access to education. But the fundamental question that we should be asking ourselves is that, is Africa going to follow a sequential route? In other words, deal with access, then quality, then the new ways of learning and teaching. And my whole idea here is that we can't follow that sequence. We've got to, once we're addressing access, we at the same time need to leapfrog and make sure that we're introducing new ways of learning and teaching for relevance. And if we're teaching for relevance, the issue of language becomes particularly important. That's why I talked about the importance of making sure that we can, out of the 1,500 languages, with maybe more than 2,000 if you include the dialects, we can use technology today. We've got to understand the opportunities that exist out of big data, that we can use big data and machine learning to actually fast-track the process of how we're developing these languages as languages that are used in the classroom, as languages that provide clearer context to our young people to understand abstract concepts. And I think it's absolutely possible, especially in the context of how technology and where technology is today.
In a continent where you have so many young people, but you also have an issue of leadership, where there's a leadership deficit, how then do we achieve all of these goals? Where you find some young people saying, well, Yoweri Museveni has been in power for so long, and yet when you look at the education system, he doesn't even understand what we're talking about when we're talking about AI.
Well, this is where we've got to really teach leadership in schools. We must produce a crop of really vibrant, knowledgeable, and innovative young people who are going to take over and lead our continent. And we see leadership everywhere. I don't think, yes, of course, we have countries in the continent where, maybe democracy hasn't quite worked, maybe leaders have been in positions for many years. But it doesn't mean we don't have a lot of leaders, young leaders in the continent. You just look at, for instance, the development of enterprise, of business in the continent. Certainly you see a lot of young people who are developing amazing solutions or who are involved in social progress in the continent that shows that actually we're not short of quality leaders in the continent. And it's just how we give them opportunities. And sometimes, you're going to find leaders and the role that leaders play, not necessarily just in politics, in civil society, in labor, in business. And this is what we need in Africa. We need more of that so that we're making progress in terms of really taking our rightful role as a continent which has a lot of young people and therefore is really the future. Yes, of course, one of the important things for Future Nation schools is to make sure that we can demonstrate the quality of learning and teaching that we have in our schools. And therefore, initially, of course, we don't want to have too many schools everywhere, because if you do that, one of the biggest constraints is, for instance, the quality of teachers that we have, because as I said earlier, you can't have quality education without quality teachers. Right. So that's the first thing. If we then starting to produce the cohort of teachers, especially in sufficient numbers that allow us to grow, understanding that, obviously we're going to share some of our teachers and our learning and teaching with especially the big system, it does mean that we've got to go through a very carefully managed process of growth, because otherwise we just revert to the mean, we just revert to being like everybody else. And yet we are really different. It is important for us to really continue and refine our model, make sure that, you know, we can monitor, we can measure the quality that we are producing. We get a lot of feedback from external people, and that way we're going to be able to grow and make sure that we're creating a DNA of Future Nation schools that we are able to sustain as an institution going forward.
Yeah, and that leads to my next question. What are some of the lessons that you have sort of learned, not only over the years, but in embarking on this project?
Well, there are many lessons that I've learned. If you just consider the fact that, you know, I came from an accounting background into telecoms, into banking, and I'm now in education, there's something to be said about making sure that we as individuals are not allowing ourselves to be put in pigeonholes, in boxes. But that has major implications. If you're going to move from one sector to the other, from one area to another, especially into something you may have known very deeply about before, it does mean you've got to spend a lot of time really getting yourself up to speed. So today, I mean, I can talk a lot about education because, you know, I've taken the time and the trouble to invest the time in knowing a lot about education. So that's really important. Secondly, it is important for us to realize that all of us are capable of a lot more than we often give ourselves credit for. And that's why, you know, if you look at what we're doing in education these days and what we're doing at Future Nation schools, you know, it's taken a lot of time. So businesses take time. And sometimes, you know, not all of the things that you want to do succeed. So you learn a lot from failure than often you learn from your successes. So you must be prepared to fail. You must learn very quickly. You must fail very quickly and move on and use your lessons in improving whatever it is that you're trying to do. And this is what we've tried, you know, this is what we've come across at Future Nation schools. And yes, we continue to grow.
What are you most grateful for as we wrap up the conversation and we wrap up the year? 2018 has been quite the eventful year.
Well, it's been a difficult year, 2018, but, you know, I always look at the silver lining. I always, you know, have a much more optimistic approach to life than the opposite. So, you know, I learned quite a lot. Obviously, we wouldn't have been able to do what we do had it not been for the amazing support that we get from our teachers, from our parents, who send their children to our schools, even though people didn't even know who we are when we started last year. I'm really grateful to my family for all the support that I get for, you know, setting this thing up, because, you know, it takes a lot of effort and a lot of time to set up any business. And any business that you start, you often, you know, do a business plan, and your business plan is often wrong from day one, because you're going to come across things that you didn't even know as you start to operate that business. But when you have wonderful people, you know, around you that, you know, spur you on, that encourage you, there's no challenge that's big enough that cannot be overcome.
Thank you. Thank you for being our blueprint. To see that something is possible gives you so much hope, and it gives you permission to then go for that which you want. And go.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Dudu.